The house on the hill was famous in the city, not because of its beauty, but because of the man who owned it. Alexander Moore, a self-made millionaire, had built an empire before turning 40, yet the house felt strangely cold these days. His mother, Eleanor Moore, once known for her graceful figure and warm smile, had been quietly fading within those walls. Each morning, the maid noticed her dresses hanging looser, her hands trembling slightly as she lifted her teacup, her appetite shrinking like a candle burning at both ends. "I'm just tired," Eleanor would say softly whenever someone asked, forcing a smile that never reached her eyes. Alexander was rarely home. Business trips blurred into one another, meetings replacing family dinners, and he trusted his wife, Clara, completely. Clara was elegant, polite, always perfectly dressed, and unfailingly respectful in public. She managed the household with strict precision, insisting on routines, schedules, and discipline. Eleanor, however, seemed to grow smaller under those rules. Meals were served at exact times, portions measured carefully, and any request outside the routine was met with a gentle but firm refusal. "Doctor's orders," Clara would say sweetly, though no doctor had been seen in months. Eleanor's friends stopped visiting after Clara explained that Eleanor needed peace and isolation to recover. Phone calls were shortened, letters went unanswered, and slowly, the world outside the mansion disappeared for Eleanor. At night, she lay awake, her stomach aching, her heart heavier than hunger, wondering how she had become a burden in her own son's home. She missed Alexander terribly but didn't want to worry him. She believed, perhaps foolishly, that Clara knew best. Day by day, Eleanor's strength faded. She walked less, spoke less, and ate even less. The mirrors in the hallway reflected a woman she barely recognized. Hollow cheeks, collarbones sharp under thin skin, eyes dulled by quiet suffering. Meanwhile, Clara watched everything with calm detachment, noting the numbers on the scale, satisfied with the progress. Then, unexpectedly, Alexander's schedule changed. A deal fell apart, a flight was canceled, and for the first time in months, he decided to return home early without informing anyone. He imagined surprising his wife, hugging his mother, enjoying a simple dinner together. As his car passed through the iron gates, something felt wrong. The house looked the same, yet the air felt heavy. Inside, the staff seemed nervous, avoiding eye contact. Alexander climbed the stairs 2 at a time, calling for his mother. When Eleanor stepped out of her room, he froze. She looked fragile, like she might break if he hugged her too tightly. "Mom, what happened to you?" he whispered, his voice shaking. Eleanor tried to smile, tried to reassure him, but tears filled her eyes before words could. At that moment, Clara appeared in the hallway, calm as ever, greeting him with a kiss and a composed smile. "You're home early," she said. Alexander didn't answer. His eyes stayed on his mother, and for the first time, doubt crept into his heart. Something was very wrong in his own house, and he was about to discover that the woman he trusted most had been hiding a truth far darker than he ever imagined. Late that night, sleep refused to come to Alexander. The image of his mother standing in the doorway, thinner than memory, replayed again and again in his mind like a warning he had ignored for too long. Beside him, Clara slept peacefully, her breathing calm, her face innocent in the soft glow of the bedside lamp, and that contrast unsettled him more than anger ever could. At dawn, Alexander pretended to leave for the office as usual, kissing Clara goodbye and promising to return late, but instead he parked his car down the road and quietly came back through the side entrance, something he hadn't done since the early days of their marriage. The house was unusually silent. From behind a partially closed door, he watched as Clara moved through the kitchen with practiced ease, preparing breakfast. She placed a generous plate of food on one tray, rich and steaming, and then a second tray with barely more than a few spoonfuls of thin porridge and a cup of lukewarm tea. Alexander's chest tightened as he saw her carefully switch the trays, making sure Eleanor's was the smaller one. "Doctor says we must be strict," Clara murmured to the maid, her voice gentle but firm, "or she'll never recover." The maid nodded uneasily, clearly uncomfortable but afraid to argue. Alexander followed at a distance as Clara carried the tray upstairs to Eleanor's room. He stood frozen in the shadowed hallway, listening. "You know the rules, Mother," Clara said sweetly, setting the tray down. "Small portions, no snacks, and no visitors today. You need discipline." Eleanor's weak voice answered softly, apologetic, as if she were the one at fault. Alexander clenched his fists. Later, he watched Clara remove a basket of fresh fruit Eleanor had requested, claiming sugar would be dangerous, and lock the kitchen pantry afterward. Hours passed, and with every moment, the truth revealed itself in painful fragments. Clara controlled not only Eleanor's food but her movements, her communications, even her emotions, disguising cruelty as care. When Eleanor tried to call an old friend, Clara gently took the phone away, smiling as she said, "Too much excitement is bad for your health." Alexander felt sick. This wasn't neglect, it was calculated. He followed Clara again in the afternoon, his heart pounding as he watched her weigh Eleanor on a scale hidden in the laundry room, writing the number down in a small notebook. Her lips curved in satisfaction when the number was lower. In that instant, the final piece fell into place. This wasn't about health. It was about control, resentment, and something darker, a quiet punishment carried out behind closed doors. Memories surfaced suddenly, moments he had dismissed before. Clara's subtle irritation when Eleanor offered opinions, her cold silence when Alexander defended his mother, the way she insisted Eleanor move into the guest wing for comfort. Guilt hit him like a blow. He had trusted blindly, choosing convenience over presence, success over family. As evening approached, Alexander made his decision. He would not confront Clara yet. He needed proof, undeniable and clear, not just for himself but to protect his mother completely. That night, he installed small cameras in the common areas under the excuse of upgrading security, his hands shaking as he worked. When he reviewed the footage later, alone in his study, the screen showed everything he feared and more. Clara discarding untouched food, instructing staff to report Eleanor's behavior, locking doors under the pretense of safety. Tears blurred Alexander's vision, not just from anger, but from shame. His mother was suffering under his roof, and he had been absent. As he closed the laptop, a quiet fury settled in his chest, calm but unyielding. Tomorrow he would act, not as a businessman, not as a husband, but as a son who had finally opened
Morning
his
arrived
eyes.
with a stillness
Scene 3
so heavy
would change
it felt
everything,
deliberate.
as if the house itself was holding its breath. Alexander rose before dawn, his decision firm, his heart steady in a way it hadn't been since his return. He watched the live feed one last time, seeing Clara move with her usual calm efficiency, unaware that her carefully constructed world was about to collapse. When Eleanor appeared on the screen, slowly lowering herself into a chair, her hands trembling as she tried to lift her teacup, something inside Alexander broke open, not into rage, but resolve. He walked upstairs and knocked gently on his mother's door, a knock she hadn't heard from him in months. Eleanor looked up in surprise when he entered, her eyes widening as if she were seeing a memory rather than reality. He knelt in front of her, taking her fragile hands in his, feeling how light they were, and for the first time he didn't try to hide his tears. "You don't have to be strong anymore," he whispered. "I'm here now." Eleanor tried to protest, to defend Clara out of habit more than belief, but Alexander gently stopped her, promising explanations later. He helped her dress, called a private doctor without informing anyone, and ordered a full breakfast brought to her room. When Clara entered moments later and saw the food, her smile froze. "That's not part of the routine," she said lightly, but Alexander stood, his posture calm and unmovable. "The routine ends today." Clara laughed softly, trying to brush it off, but the sound echoed hollowly in the room. Alexander turned on the television mounted on the wall, connecting it to his laptop. One by one, the recordings played, the measured portions, the discarded meals, the locked pantry, the notebook with recorded weights. The color drained from Clara's face, though she still tried to speak, to justify, to explain. "I was helping her," she said quickly. "You know how dramatic she can be." Eleanor stared at the screen, disbelief turning slowly into realization, then pain. The betrayal cut deeper than hunger ever had. Alexander didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. His silence carried more weight than anger. He explained, calmly and clearly, that the house staff had been reassigned, that legal action was already in motion, and that Clara's access to the household, finances, and decisions had been revoked effective immediately. When she realized he was serious, the composure cracked. Her voice sharpened, accusations spilling out. Jealousy, resentment, years of feeling overshadowed by a woman she believed had too much influence. Alexander listened without interruption, then replied simply, "You didn't protect my family. You punished it." Security arrived quietly, and Clara was escorted out, her heels clicking sharply against the marble floor until the sound disappeared completely. The house felt different almost instantly, as if fresh air had rushed in through unseen windows. In the days that followed, Eleanor's recovery was slow but steady. Proper meals returned color to her cheeks, laughter returned to her voice, and sunlight once again filled her room. Alexander rearranged his life with the same intensity he once reserved for business, canceling trips, declining deals, choosing presence over profit. He sat with his mother during meals, listened to stories he had heard 100 times, and realized he had never truly listened before. One afternoon, as they walked together in the garden, Eleanor squeezed his hand and said softly, "I thought I was invisible." Alexander stopped, looked at her, and answered, "You were never invisible. I just wasn't looking." The scandal never reached the public the way it could have. Alexander made sure of that. Not out of mercy, but because his focus was no longer on revenge, it was on repair. The mansion on the hill slowly became a home again, filled not with control and silence, but warmth and care. And in that quiet transformation lay the real lesson. Success means nothing if it blinds you to suffering, and love, once neglected, must be protected with action, not words.